NBA YoungBoy just came out and dropped some jaw-dropping claims about how Atlantic Records allegedly played him out of what could have been a $300 million empire. And listen to this, the breakdown is wild. We're talking about a young mogul who built one of the most loyal fan bases in hip-hop, only to say he got locked into what he describes as modern-day slavery. This isn't your typical artist versus label drama. This is about an industry blueprint that preys on young black talent, and YoungBoy just pulled the curtain back on the whole operation. By the end of this video, you're going to see exactly how these deals are structured and why he believes no artist should ever sign with Atlantic Records. Let me walk you through it, because girl, this goes way deeper than headlines and tweets. NBA YoungBoy was already one of the most streamed artists in the world, racking up millions of views without major label backing. But hold up, here's where it really gets serious. The Louisiana rapper didn't just miss out on a check. He exposed a system designed to trap creators into contracts that reward everyone except the one actually making the music. And this didn't just hit YoungBoy, it opened the door to questions about how Atlantic Records allegedly ran similar plays on other artists, and the numbers will make your head spin. To really grasp how this supposed $300 million finesse unfolded, we've got to rewind to August 2017, when an 18-year-old phenom signed what may have been the most costly deal of his life. Let's take it back to that moment in 2017. At that time, NBA YoungBoy was already building a massive YouTube following, dropping mixtapes that pulled in millions of views with zero industry machine behind him. The hunger was there, the buzz was undeniable, and then Atlantic Records stepped in with what looked like a golden ticket. But you won't believe this. They locked him into a 5-album contract worth just $2 million through Mike Caron's artist partner group. Now let me explain why that should have set off alarms from day one. We're talking $2 million spread across 5 albums. That's only $400,000 per project. For someone already doing superstar-level numbers independently, that kind of offer feels like a slap in the face. But remember, YoungBoy was only 18, and like a lot of young artists, the upfront money looked bigger than the long-term math. The timing of this agreement matters more than people realize. In 2017, he was riding the momentum from projects like 38 Baby and Mind of a Menace 3, which had already stamped him as a serious player in rap. His YouTube presence was skyrocketing, and in the streets, his credibility was solid. Atlantic didn't just see potential, they saw profit, and they saw a teenager who didn't yet understand the fine print. And here's the part that really stings. The contract reportedly included massive red flags that were never fully broken down for him. First off, he didn't own his masters, meaning Atlantic would control those original recordings indefinitely. That's the crown jewel for any artist, because masters keep generating revenue for decades. When you don't control them, you're grinding while someone else stacks generational wealth off your art. And second, this might be the biggest kicker, Atlantic had total authority over what qualified as an album versus a mixtape. That small clause right there, that became the backbone of the entire finesse. They tucked it deep inside the contract wording, fully aware that most young artists wouldn't catch what it really meant until the damage was already done. On paper, his music was released under his own Never Broke Again label, which sounds empowering, but in reality, Atlantic still had its hands on all the levers that actually mattered.
The NBA Never Broke Again brand was YoungBoy's vision, his mindset, his movement, his people, but Atlantic was strategically positioned to cash in on every single piece of it. Even fans and insiders could see the red flags early. Industry voices were already calling $2 million for 5 albums from an artist with his buzz, straight up highway robbery. But by then, the paperwork was signed and Atlantic had its grip locked in. What makes this sting even more is that YoungBoy was already proving he didn't need the traditional industry machine to win. His YouTube growth was unheard of for an artist coming out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He was building a fan base that would stand 10 toes down for him no matter what, but he didn't yet understand that this loyalty was his real leverage. And guess who was watching that the whole time? Here's where it starts getting wild. After putting pen to paper in 2017, YoungBoy went into overdrive, dropping project after project like his life depended on it. We're talking about a grind that most artists in the game simply couldn't match. He treated music like clocking into a 9-to-5, always in the studio, always recording, always feeding the streets. But hold up, Atlantic had a different strategy, and this is where their true intentions started showing. The biggest move they allegedly pulled was the album versus mixtape loophole. And listen to this because it's next level chess. According to the standard APG contract, and I quote, the artist must submit at least 2 projects per calendar year, one of which may be classified as an album under the label's discretion. But here's the twist.
Anything beyond those 2 yearly projects would be labeled a mixtape and wouldn't count toward fulfilling the album requirement. Let that really sit with you for a second. Atlantic had full authority to decide what counted toward YoungBoy's 5-album obligation, not YoungBoy himself. That's a calculated setup designed to keep an artist locked in for as long as possible. So while YoungBoy was out here grinding non-stop and releasing over 18 projects since 2017, Atlantic only recognized 3 as official studio albums. Do the math on that. 18 total releases, but just 3 applied to the deal. That leaves 15 projects that reportedly generated millions for Atlantic, yet didn't push him any closer to completing his contract. This type of contractual maneuvering feels like it should be illegal, but insiders will tell you it's disturbingly common in the music business. The releases Atlantic declined to count included major titles like AI YoungBoy, Until Death Call My Name, For Respect, Top, and several others that pulled massive streaming numbers and serious revenue. By any normal standard, those projects could easily qualify as albums, but Atlantic held the power to label them differently. That's calculated, no cap. YoungBoy believed he was checking boxes and inching towards freedom, but the finish line kept shifting. And according to people familiar with how these deals work, APG and Atlantic Records had every financial incentive to stretch his time on their roster as long as possible. They were straight up squeezing him for non-stop content while keeping him locked inside that same contract. The mental toll of that kind of manipulation is something people don't talk about enough. Picture grinding day and night, dropping project after project, believing you're inching towards freedom, only to realize the very people labeled as your partners are strategically keeping you bound. That kind of betrayal would crush most artists. But YoungBoy, he kept applying pressure. And hold up, that's not even the wildest part. In July 2020, he made a move that exposed just how far labels will go to maintain leverage. He went on Instagram and said, "I told them they can have the next 4 albums free. All I want is my masters." And I still got told no.
Dirty game. Let that register. This man offered Atlantic 4 albums, projects easily worth tens of millions, just to own the rights to his own music, and they declined. That's when it becomes clear this isn't just about dollars, it's about authority and control. They would rather keep him tied down than let him possess what he created. The financial weight of that proposal is massive. 4 NBA YoungBoy albums, with his streaming dominance and loyal fan base, could realistically bring in $50 to $100 million. He was essentially saying, take the money, just give me my freedom, and Atlantic still wouldn't budge. That tells you everything about the bigger agenda. That refusal exposed the real objective. Labels don't only want the hits you're dropping today, they want ownership of your entire catalog indefinitely. They want control over your legacy, your family's inheritance, and revenue that stretches generations. It's not enough to profit in the present. They want to monetize your name for the next century. Things really blew up when YoungBoy started calling this out publicly. That's when the alleged blackballing kicked in, and it turned ugly fast. The industry doesn't appreciate artists exposing the machinery, and there are consequences for pulling back the curtain. In early 2022, he hit social media with statements that had executives sweating. He wrote, "Why blackball me? I'm the good guy. I was going #1 2 weeks straight with a mixtape." Then he claimed it was taken off the charts, adding that nobody could stop him and warning artists not to sign with Atlantic because they won't support you, especially if you live a certain way. He was referring to his project Colors, and listen to this, Atlantic's response spoke volumes. That mixtape held the #1 spot on Apple Music for 2 straight weeks and debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200. The stats didn't lie. His supporters showed up heavy, proving he could dominate without the industry machine. But once he publicly challenged his contract, Atlantic allegedly removed it from select platforms. While the deluxe version stayed up on Spotify, it suddenly vanished from Apple Music with no clear explanation. That wasn't some random glitch, that looked intentional. This is what blackballing looks like in real time. The message felt obvious. Speak out against the label and your momentum can disappear overnight. They were reportedly willing to sacrifice their own short-term revenue just to send a warning about stepping out of line. That's how ruthless corporations can get when their power structure is questioned. The Colors situation mattered because it revealed YoungBoy's actual market strength. With 0 radio rotation, no traditional promo run, and minimal industry backing, he was still outselling artists backed by full corporate machines. That's the kind of organic fan base record labels fantasize about. But instead of pouring gasoline on that fire, Atlantic was allegedly throwing water on it. And YoungBoy? He wasn't staying quiet. He continued calling out their playbook, saying flat out that his music wasn't promoted by Atlantic Records and that he received 0 assistance from them. According to him, they simply sat back and collected the revenue. Let that sink in. NBA YoungBoy was reportedly Atlantic's top streaming artist, building his empire through YouTube with no real label push, and they were just cashing in. That revelation cracked open one of the biggest myths in the music business, that labels earn their cut through heavy promotion and marketing muscle. In YoungBoy's situation, Atlantic was allegedly contributing nothing to elevate his run, yet still taking the lion's share of the profits. That's not partnership, that's a one-sided setup. According to DJ Academics, YoungBoy brings in close to $17 million a year from YouTube alone. That's more than many major label artists earn across every revenue stream combined. No marketing rollouts, no promo blitz, but the label is still taking most of the pie. That's parasitic energy, plain and simple.
The YouTube stats tell their own story. YoungBoy built his foundation there, connecting directly with supporters and dropping visuals that hit millions of views within hours. His comment sections felt like a global fan club with people from everywhere writing for him. That kind of loyalty can't be manufactured, yet Atlantic was positioned to benefit from every click. YoungBoy also claimed labels sabotage their own artists when it comes to protecting content. He posted, "Atlantic banned my music from all YouTubers, get a real job," pointing out how reaction channels and creators were profiting from his catalog while he allegedly saw none of that upside. Atlantic had the authority to clamp down on it, but according to him, they didn't, possibly because they were still getting paid either way. The more he spoke up, the more the industry's hidden mechanics started surfacing. And here's the twist, he wasn't the only one raising his voice. Other Atlantic artists began stepping forward as well. Suddenly, the similarities were too obvious to dismiss. This wasn't just one angry superstar venting. It pointed to a larger systemic issue impacting multiple artists. The same day YoungBoy aired out Atlantic, Meek Mill shared his own explosive claims. He posted that he made Atlantic Records hundreds of millions, accused them of exploiting him, said they pushed certain artists to him while he was incarcerated, claimed they didn't invest in expensive pain, and alleged they blocked him from dropping another project for 9 months at the end of his contract after he had generated massive revenue for them. That timing didn't feel random. Multiple artists seemed to hit their breaking point at once, and the spotlight was turning toward Atlantic's business practices. Meek's situation stood out because it highlighted how release schedules can allegedly be manipulated to keep artists under control even after they believe they fulfilled their obligations. This wasn't an isolated complaint. It started to feel like a coordinated awakening. PNB Rock, Bad Baby, and Roddy Ricch were also linked to similar grievances about Atlantic's alleged predatory tactics. A pattern appeared to be forming. Young, buzzing artists signing lopsided deals and spending years trying to escape them. PNB Rock's story hits differently in hindsight. He had publicly expressed frustration about feeling unsupported by Atlantic, and those tensions were documented before his tragic passing. His experience underscores how industry pressure can weigh heavily on an artist's mental health and overall stability. Bad Baby, despite her controversial entry into the spotlight, added yet another layer to the conversation about how Atlantic handled its talent. As a young female artist, she was navigating even more layers of pressure and exploitation, exposing how industry abuse often hits harder at the intersections of gender and power. Her decision to speak up, knowing it could cost her opportunities, shows the kind of bravery it really takes to challenge corporations that big. YoungBoy also called out what he sees as discrimination tied to lifestyle and background. When he warned, "Don't sign to Atlantic if you're an artist, they're not going to support you, especially if you live a certain way," he was pointing at how labels monetize street credibility, but hesitate to truly back the artists behind it. They treat them like risks instead of long-term investments, yet they're more than happy to collect the profits. That contradiction is dangerous because it disproportionately impacts artists from marginalized communities whose stories drive the culture. Labels crave the authenticity and commercial appeal of street narratives, but often avoid investing in the people and neighborhoods that shape those narratives. Then the legal side of this started gaining attention. Industry analysts began dissecting these contracts and suggested that what YoungBoy described might actually face challenges in court.
That album versus mixtape loophole, it may not stand if proven that discretion was used in bad faith. Entertainment attorneys began publicly criticizing the predatory structure of such deals, especially when signed by teenagers without seasoned legal guidance. The imbalance of power between a global corporation and one young artist creates conditions where exploitation isn't just possible, it becomes predictable. But while lawyers debated paperwork, the streets reacted instantly. YoungBoy's 4KT fanbase mobilized, boycotting Atlantic affiliates and demanding accountability. The hashtag #FreeYoungBoy movement gained traction, and independent artists started sharing their own label horror stories. The level of organization was different this time. These weren't passive listeners. This was a community that recognized injustice and decided to respond.
They coordinated streaming boycotts, launched social media campaigns, and even protested outside Atlantic Records' offices. And listen, this moment shifted how people view record deals across the industry. YoungBoy didn't just challenge Atlantic, he questioned a system many believe has exploited young black artists for decades. By speaking out despite potential retaliation, he sparked broader conversations about reform. The numbers he revealed are staggering and read like a textbook example of contract manipulation. He signed a 5-album agreement in 2017, yet by 2022, he had released more than 18 projects, with only 3 officially counting toward that deal. Analysts pointed out that at his release pace, he could ultimately deliver 28 total projects under a 5-album obligation, nearly 6 times what was originally agreed upon. That's not a partnership. That's what he called modern-day slavery. When you actually crunch those figures, the financial scale becomes enormous. Each YoungBoy release drives millions through streaming, merchandise, and touring leverage. If a label receives 28 projects instead of 5, that's effectively 23 additional bodies of work generating revenue beyond the scope of the original deal. We're potentially talking hundreds of millions in long-term value. And here's the part that really makes you pause. Despite all the alleged roadblocks and lack of support, YoungBoy still became the second most streamed artist on YouTube in 2022, trailing only Drake. He built that dominance without heavy radio rotation, without a traditional promotional machine, and while claiming consistent industry blackballing. That right there is the power of a real connection with your audience, and it shows the old industry blueprint is losing its grip. YoungBoy's rise without traditional backing became a roadmap for the next wave. He proved you can build a massive, loyal following through direct engagement and relentless consistency. His YouTube play was different. He treated it like his own broadcast network, dropping videos, behind-the-scenes clips, and tapping in with fans in real time. And listen, the aftershocks are still moving through the business. More artists are demanding master ownership, and attorneys are dissecting those album versus mixtape clauses in new contracts. YoungBoy's revelations forced uncomfortable conversations about fair pay and artist rights that executives would rather avoid. New artists entering the game today are far more contract savvy because of what he exposed. They're asking tougher questions, pushing for better splits, and walking away from deals that don't honor their worth. That awareness shift traces directly back to his decision to speak out. Established stars began echoing those same demands for transparency and respect. When he said Atlantic should ban his music from reaction videos and posted, "Atlantic ban my music from all YouTubers, get a real job," he spotlighted another crack in the system, labels profiting while failing to shield their artists' content. The irony is heavy. Creators were monetizing reactions to his music. Atlantic allegedly wasn't shutting it down, yet they also weren't actively promoting him.
Everyone seemed to benefit from his work, while he remained bound to a restrictive agreement. That exposed another layer of dysfunction. Collect the revenue, skip the responsibility. The cultural ripple goes beyond rap. YoungBoy's situation became shorthand for broader patterns of exploitation that many young black entrepreneurs recognize in other industries. His story resonated with anyone who's faced a lopsided power dynamic in business. Today, his experience stands as a warning sign for rising artists eyeing major label contracts. His words, "Don't sign to Atlantic, trust me," circulated widely and likely influenced countless decisions. "Don't sign to Atlantic" evolved into a slogan for creative independence. The wall of silence maintained through blackballing and pressure tactics is finally cracking. Artists are realizing that speaking up, even at personal cost, can spark lasting change. YoungBoy demonstrated that genuine artistry and a loyal fan base can withstand industry pushback. Independent creators began studying his direct-to-fan strategy and platform control. His trajectory without heavy label support became a discussion point in classrooms and industry seminars. He showed that the traditional middleman structure is losing relevance in a digital world. The legal ripple effects could benefit artists long-term. Entertainment lawyers are referencing scenarios like his to challenge similar clauses, and some have secured wins by leaning on arguments his case brought to light. His impact isn't just about personal liberation. It's about exposing a system critics say has exploited young talent for decades. He proved that even when institutions push back, authenticity and fan loyalty can't easily be erased. The potential $300 million loss isn't just a headline figure. It symbolizes the value extracted from creators while they receive a fraction in return. But by breaking down the mechanics publicly, he may have helped prevent others from signing similar deals. What he endured became a warning beacon for the next generation. He could have stayed silent and taken the money. Instead, he chose confrontation over comfort. That kind of stance reshapes industries and shields future talent. Atlantic may have believed contract leverage and blackballing would quiet him, but the truth traveled faster. The landscape is shifting because artists like NBA YoungBoy refuse to accept exploitative agreements dressed up as opportunities.
His reach now stretches beyond music into conversations about ownership, equity, and generational wealth. That's legacy-level impact. The movement he sparked continues as emerging artists cite his example when prioritizing independence. His journey shows that telling the truth, no matter the cost, can outlive any short-term setback. And that kind of legacy? It's bigger than any deal a label could ever put on the table.